You're listening to Up From Dust. I'm Celia Yopis-Jepsen. This isn't something we deal with on the Great Plains, but on coasts throughout the United States, the very ground on which people built their homes is vanishing before their eyes. And a particularly ambitious project brought together journalists in Louisiana and Alaska to tell the stories of indigenous communities watching as the world's changing climate eats away at their land. They found that entire communities are making drastic changes to where and how they live because they have no choice, and many bear the scars of history. They were already forced off their land in the past by colonialism. The podcast Sea Change takes the story from here with host and reporter Eve Tesfaye, based at WWNO in New Orleans, and Sage Smiley, at the time news director of KYUK in Bethel, Alaska. First, Sage takes us to the far north.
We're a couple of miles outside of the small Yupik village of Nunapachuk in a vast tundra. It's around 420 miles west of Anchorage, accessible only by small plane, boat, or, when the rivers and lakes are frozen, by truck or snow machine along the region's ice highway. Now, in summertime, Nunapachuk looks like it sits at the edge of the sky. The land is so flat and so thin it almost seems like it floats. The region is a water world, a patchwork of ponds, lakes, streams, sloughs, and rivers. But we've headed by boat to one of the highest points around, maybe 30 feet above sea level. After winding along the Johnson River and through a lake full of water plants, we slow at the base of a low hill. Morris Alexi, who you heard from earlier, hops out of the skiff, sinking a few inches into the spongy tundra ground.
Maybe I made a mistake of not putting on my rubber boots.
The muck soaks into the tops of his brown hiking boots. Morris labors across the wobbling ground.
I have been calling the Alaskan quicksand.
Like most people in Nunapachuk, Morris is Alaska native, Yupik, and speaks fluent Yukhtun. In both English and Yukhtun, the 56-year-old doesn't rush his words. As he holds onto the nose of the boat, the ground moves like a waterbed.
Is it hard?
It's very spongy.
Yes, and that is exactly what is happening to our whole community land.
Morris has lived in Nunapachuk for his whole life. He's lived many lives here: a tribal administrator, fuel spill cleanup worker, local Alaska Native Corporation board member, teacher. Those are past lives. Now his life is dedicated to moving the entire town of Nunapachuk. We come to a stop at the top of the low hill, covered in scrubby lichens and other ground plants. Standing at the crest of this rolling wave of empty land, it's hard to imagine a town. This is where Nunapachuk will move, has to move. But right now there's nothing here but a weather station and a probe measuring the underground temperature. Morris says the data goes back to the Woodwell Climate Research Center in Massachusetts.
They have to check if there'd be a possible welling spot, freshwater spot. That we'd have to have a fresh water.
As he speaks, he turns around, looking at the open hilltop as if envisioning the pieces that need to fall into place.
Airport, a barge landing.
Again, there's nothing here. Every building, light pole, and walkway that will make up a town is yet to be built. It's a radical thing to consider, moving an entire town to the top of this barren hill. But it may be the only option because the ground under the current village of Nunapachuk, a couple miles away, is disappearing. Here in the subarctic, there's one very specific problem that literally underpins most village infrastructure.
And we had already found out through research and data that Nunap is sitting on permafrost.
For centuries, the ground under Nunapachuk stayed frozen year-round, a phenomenon called permafrost. As the climate of western Alaska changes, that ancient permafrost is thawing. It's at the core of Nunapachuk's need to relocate. Where there is a town right now, and has been a town since the late 1930s, you can't safely walk on the ground. Instead, a spiderwebbing system of sidewalks and roads built of boards crisscross the tundra between houses and buildings.
Our kids can't really play anywhere.
Gertrude Lewis is a kindergarten teacher in Nunapachuk. She says the thawing permafrost can make the town claustrophobic in the summers. You can't leave the boardwalk.
My grandson, he stepped off the boardwalk and he went knee-deep. We had to pull him out. We lost his rubber boot.
When you were a kid, could you play on the tundra?
Everywhere. Everywhere. We went everywhere.
And now you have to stay on the boardwalk.
Stay on the boardwalk.
There's a word in the Yupik language to describe the feeling of living on thawing permafrost.
Angayik is where when you walk, you feel like you're on jelly.
The boardwalks in Nunap dip and curve as the ground thaws and unevenly degrades below them, like an old-fashioned roller coaster. Many houses and electrical poles sit at angles ranging from jaunty to precarious, and as the permafrost thaws, it also increases riverbank erosion, literally eating away land from underneath the village. It's not a process that can be reversed, and eventually reaches a point where there isn't usable land anymore. And many in Nunapachuk see the village at that point now. For village elders, relocating Nunapachuk has been a topic of conversation since they were children. One of those elders is 83-year-old Robert Nick. Sitting at his kitchen table, Robert Nick tells me he became Nunapachuk's tribal administrator when he was 19 years old.
At the time, I had some friends who had been talking about moving to higher ground, away from the wetlands that were our village is on.
Robert says over his more than 80 years in Nunapachuk, permafrost thaw has caused the already low-lying tundra to sink and pond, filling with water and breaking away into the river. Even the Yupik name of the village points to how precarious its location is.
Nunapachuk, small piece of tundra.
Small piece of tundra. So, why was the village built on land that even decades ago everyone knew wasn't stable? Robert says it was the school building that really established Nunapachuk as a community.
When the school was built, we were forced to come here.
In 1936, the Bureau of Indian Affairs built a school in Nunapachuk, not long after Alaska territorial officials made school compulsory. Its light blue buildings take up a slice of land from the center of town to the river, right by Robert's house. It's also a spot on the winding Johnson River where cumbersome shipping barges could offload supplies. So those two factors, the school and the barges, forced the Yupik people to settle there, on very soggy ground.
So it was not planned, it was not wanted, it was not agreed upon.
Before that, most Yupik people moved with the seasons and the changing texture of the ground, from winter sod houses to summer fish camps. So now, tied to a school and inflexible buildings, the people in Nunap have had to make do as the ground degrades, wreaking havoc on the village's infrastructure.
It really impacted our house. We have a lot of cracks on the floor and the walls.
That's Morris's uncle, James Berlin Sr. He's invited us over for dry fish, strips of dried salmon, and akurak, a Yupik ice cream made from berries, some kind of fat, and occasionally sugar or the mild flesh of whitefish. We sit around the kitchen, and James points to a large crack, duct-taped in some places, that runs across the middle of the living room and through the ceiling from the settling of the house.
Our porch is falling apart from the building.
James Berlin Sr. is mayor of Nunapachuk, so he gets a lot of calls.
Hello? Interview what?
But being mayor doesn't insulate him from the problems caused by living on thawing ground. His duct-taped house is not unusual. Crumbling infrastructure is the norm and visible everywhere you look in Nunap. Many doors don't shut properly as houses settle into the ground. Floors tilt at an angle. The corners of buildings rot as they come into contact with the soft ground. The public safety building hangs over the river as the bank erodes from underneath it. A whole section of town is blocked off and a handful of houses abandoned, where permafrost thaw got especially bad. A few years ago, while Morris was serving as tribal administrator, he got a call from a woman in the community, distraught because her house had fallen and filled with water. He says this was a turning point.
Our very first house that went under had 10 children, two parents, and they all moved out because of nowhere to house. And then after that, other families, like 8 in a family, they move out because of nowhere to house.
That's exactly what Morris wants to keep from happening.
I've watched out-migrations, whole families.
Gertrude Lewis, the woman who taught me the Yupik word for walking on jelly, also worries relocating might drive the community apart, like it did for her relatives in Kasigluk, a community which partly moved to more stable ground.
To me, it seems like once they start moving, they lose that closeness.
Even if they just moved a couple miles away.
I know they're my family, but it's like we don't get together and do things like we used to.
Gertrude says it's not that she's against relocation. She knows the permafrost is damaged. But the logistics of life in a new place further from the river give her pause. First of all, how would she even get there?
You have to have a four-wheeler. Some people don't have four-wheelers to do all that walking. Or even boats. Some people don't have boats.
People in Nunop still do travel miles along the rivers and across the tundra to access berry picking, moose hunting, and summer and winter fishing spots. It's a huge part of why they want to stay as close as they can to the current village site, because maintaining connection to the land means maintaining connection to culture and Yupik tradition. James Berlin Sr., Nunop's mayor, says one main way he feels this connection is through food.
I still live by season, but I have to get ready for them. The availability of those wild food that we get, they're only available at a certain time.
It's a bit early in the season, but I head out with a few of James's children and grandchildren to see what berries we can find. He'd love to make more agudak, that Yupik dessert made from berries and some kind of fat. Here, on the tundra, the sky opens up even wider, and swarms of slow mosquitoes gather around the hoods we cinch around our faces. James Berlin's daughter Sandra bends at the waist, gathering fat orange salmon berries into her bucket as we talk about relocation.
I think it'll be great for the people. That's what I think.
Why?
Over here! Look! More happier with the land. More connection. The more space everybody has, the more it'll be better.
And there's a lack of space right now?
The land is getting smaller.
And really, that is why Morris is so committed to fighting for Nunapachuk's relocation, even with the uphill climb ahead, to give all the people here the space they need to live and practice their culture. I'm back in the village in Morris's office. It's tucked in the corner of a city building. The walls are plywood and covered with printed aerial photos of the town, of the land it's lost, and of the site a couple of miles away where it will move. Morris sits at a folding table in a folding chair.
When I first started 3 years ago, it was kind of like the word relocation was kind of hush-hush at first, hush-hush, because They were afraid of the funding to be cut off. But nowadays, everybody's talking it, and you can freely say we are trying to relocate, but then still apply for grants.
You see, while Morris is planning this massive relocation, the current town of Nunop has to keep functioning. And remember, it's crumbling. Funding for new infrastructure projects in Nunapachuk can feel at odds with the push to relocate the town, but they're all vital.
How much money does Nunapachuk already have for this project?
Nothing right now.
Morris is saying he has $0 for relocation and zero government assistance.
There is no set process, and every agency that we contact with, nobody's specializing in relocation yet.
There are other communities in the region that have relocated, but on a much longer time scale. The village of Newtalk, northwest of Nunapachuk, has slowly moved to a new site 9 miles away, called Martarvik. It's taken almost 30 years. Others are retreating to a site they can already access by road.
This relocation is kind of a new page to everyone, every top agency out there, even the government of ours, the U.S. government. It is something they cannot outright do right away, I guess.
As much as Nunapachuk is alone in planning and carrying out its relocation, it's not alone in circumstance. 5 years ago, the Federal Government Accountability Office found that unclear federal leadership is the key challenge to climate migration. And last year, a statewide tribal health provider, the Alaska Native Tribal Health Consortium, released an even more blistering report. There are almost 150 communities in the state of Alaska that are in a similar boat to Nunapachuk. Their villages are threatened by some combination of permafrost thaw, flooding, or erosion. Some need to move, others need to retreat or undertake massive climate mitigation projects. And the lack of a coherent federal system puts the onus on these communities to invent workarounds before infrastructure totally fails.
Do you feel like the government agencies owe Nunapachuk?
Oh yeah, we were still nomadic people, like nomadic, where we went from like 75 miles away each fall and spring.
Morris says government officials are the reason Nunop exists where it does. They bear responsibility to help his sinking community. But even if that help arrives, Morris's uncle and Nunop's mayor, James Berlin Sr., he doesn't see how the community can overcome the logistical barriers they face.
I wish I could see it when people relocate, but it won't be in my time. The next generation will have that opportunity to enjoy it.
That's what's happening in Alaska. After the break, Eva takes us back down to Louisiana.
Back here in Louisiana, it's a windy, drizzly day when Cherie Mathern drives us to the edge of the water. Cherie is a member of the Pointe-aux-Chenes Indian tribe. She parks her truck in a gravel lot, pelicans sit on rocks lining the shore, there are just a couple of other trucks and 2 people fishing. When we get out and look at the water, Cherie starts to explain where we are, but cuts herself off. There are sleek gray dolphins swimming around, putting on a little show for us.
Here, this is where, oh wow, there's 3 of them.
Whoa, yeah.
They're beautiful.
They're really active. Like
Very,
I've never seen so many dolphins in my life.
They're definitely feeding.
Seeing incredible creatures like this on a daily basis is one reason Cherie loves living here. Her tribal land in southeast Louisiana. It's pretty far down the boot of the state, where if you're looking at a map, the green mostly turns to blue.
Whenever some people pull up our location on a map, they're like, oh wow, they're in the water. When you zoom in, then you'll see like little spigots of land.
We're standing at the Point Aux Chênes Marina, where the bayou running through the tribe intersects with a canal. Cherie says saltwater and freshwater converge here. It creates a current that attracts fish and shrimp, which in turn attracts the dolphins and other marine life.
My husband is a craft fisherman, so he has caught sharks in his cage. He has caught stingrays, turtles. But yeah, so we have just this very diverse ecosystem.
We just heard how in Alaska, climate change is causing permafrost to thaw. Here in Louisiana, changes to our climate bring sea level rise, coastal erosion, and saltwater intrusion. The place where salt and freshwater converge used to happen further south. Cherie points at telephone poles sticking out of the water, where land used to be, where her tribe used to live.
If you look towards that way, you'll see a string of line of telephone poles, electricity poles.
Oh, yeah.
That all used to be land, and people had houses down there.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And then now it's just all open water.
In fact, the whole neighborhood is surrounded by water that didn't used to be there.
You go look at the back door, and that used to be all land.
I'm sitting on tribal elder Brenda Ann Billiot's couch, about 5 minutes away from the marina. She's lived in Point Aux Chênes for over 50 years, and she points at her backyard.
You can go look at the back there, all you see is water.
This land is precarious. On top of saltwater intrusion and land loss, Brenda says she's also noticed the hurricanes are getting worse. Brenda's house is brand new because her old house was completely destroyed during Hurricane Ida in 2021.
The whole back end was gone. And then the ceiling, all you had was insulation all over, broken glass and everything.
And whenever a bad storm like that happens, the tribe often gets asked, why don't you just move? But for Brenda, moving isn't an option. Her heart is in Point Aux Chênes.
It's quiet, and everybody's family around here. And we just love being here, no matter what. The hurricanes come, we come back, and we rebuild, and we just love it here.
Unlike New Nupachuck, which is working to relocate, Brenda and her tribe have decided to stay, or at least try to, despite the fact that their land is disappearing. This strategy is called adapting in place. In other words, make changes to the way they live, where they live. Cherie says the tribe never considered relocation.
Everyone agreed that they have no need to want to move away. They will continue to live down here and do what they have to do to continue to live down here.
Part of the reason for that is their livelihoods depend on a close relationship to the water. It's hard to overstate just how important fishing is to the Point Aux Chênes tribe. Earl Billiot, Brenda's husband, is still crabbing in his 70s. He's a man of few words, but a lot of jokes. For example, Earl didn't go to college, but when I ask him,
How long have you been a fisherman?
All my life. Since I got out of college right here.
Earl actually got kicked out of school because he missed classes to go shrimping. He's been a fisherman ever since. All the boats, docks, and processing facilities he relies on are here in Point Aux Chênes. But fishing is more than work. It's continuing a generations-long way of living. And for Earl and his tribe to keep doing this, they need to adapt to the changing environment. To understand Point Aux Chênes' decision to adapt in place, we first have to talk about another tribal community, only a 10-minute drive from the Point Aux Chênes Marina. One that suffered from all the same problems as Point Aux Chênes: land loss, saltwater intrusion, ever more severe storms, but one that made a very different decision. Ile-de-Jean-Charles. Cherie sometimes calls it the island.
The Ile-de-Jean-Charles tribe is one of our sister tribes. Like my grandfather is from the island, and my grandmother is from Point Aux Chênes, so they have a lot of intermarriage between the different families, and we support them. We all go through the similar issues.
But there is one crucial difference. Cherie's community, Point Aux Chênes, is mostly inside the levee system, while Ile-de-Jean-Charles is outside of it. The Army Corps of Engineers chose to leave it out to cut costs, a decision which left the people there much more vulnerable to storms. People from a few different tribes lived on Ile-de-Jean-Charles. And in 2016, one of them, the John Charles Choctaw Nation, submitted a proposal to the federal government to fund its relocation after years of research and planning. And they got the money, sort of.
The plan originally was hijacked.
Hijacked because even though the federal government funded the tribe's relocation, the tribe didn't get the money directly. You see, the federal government gave the relocation money to the state, and the state took over the process. The tribe says the state pushed their leadership out of the planning and destroyed their vision for resettlement. The relocation site, about 40 miles inland north of Ile de Jean Charles, is called the New Isle, and many tribal members who moved there face issues with their new houses: rain leaking through roofs, defective plumbing, and faulty air conditioning. Problems that sound a lot like what the people in Nunapachuk experienced, only these buildings are new. Erica Billiot, no relation to Brenda Ann Billiot, who you met earlier, is one of the New Isle residents. Erica Billiot told me she, her sisters, and her mother are all having these problems.
She has cracks on the side of her walls. We have cracks on the side of our walls. It rains through the doors. One of my sisters, her roof, it rains in where the stove's at. I guess because it's not sealed or whatever, but yeah. Walls are crooked, floors are crooked.
Seeing these issues, a lot of Ile de Jean Charles residents chose not to move to the relocation site. So the community scattered, exactly what the tribe was hoping to avoid. In 2023, the John Charles Choctaw Nation filed a complaint with the federal government against the state of Louisiana. They said the poor conditions at the New Isle are a result of the state taking over, pushing the tribe out of the decision-making and infringing on their sovereignty. What happened to Ile de Jean Charles is infamous among the tribes in coastal Louisiana. And for Cherie, it's a reminder to her of how a tribe's decision-making can easily be stolen.
Help from the federal and the state government is very iffy. You don't know if you're going to get help. You don't know if you're going to have things done that are supported in the best interest for the tribe.
And this particularly matters to Cherie because she's Pointe-aux-Chenes's cultural heritage and resiliency coordinator, which means it's her job to figure out how to adapt in place. And she's very careful about who the tribe partners with, only choosing organizations that center the residents' ideas. So what does adapting in place look like for Pointe-aux-Chenes? First, they need to assess what they still have and what they might lose. The tribe partners with Louisiana Sea Grant, a research program created by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA. Their scientists are working with Pointe-aux-Chenes elders and fishermen to map the most important areas to the tribe, the ones most crucial to protect, so that the tribe can direct its limited resources to these areas, like their historic mounds, for example, earthen structures built by the tribe's ancestors.
We have several mounds, but we also have several cemeteries also down here. We find it very important to protect those and just to not lose those culturally significant places.
To protect those significant places, they have to slow down land loss, the second way of adapting in place. The tribe worked with the Coalition to Restore Coastal Louisiana to build reefs from bags of recycled oyster shells. The reefs slow down waves and reduce erosion. Finally, the third way the tribe is adapting in place is by fortifying residents' homes. After storm damage from Hurricane Ida, Pointe-aux-Chenes is rebuilding to stricter building codes than the state requires. One of those homes is Brenda Ann Billiot's, the one where I sat on the couch looking out at the water in her yard. Brenda moved into her beautiful new home this year. It's 13 feet in the air.
This house is very strong. It could take 150 miles of our winds or more.
In fact, the day before I visited Brenda, the tribe celebrated her newly rebuilt house in a ceremony. But rebuilding isn't always possible, because home and flood insurance have skyrocketed to unaffordable prices over the last few years. So many people have sold their houses to people not in the tribe, who turn them into weekend fishing camps. Bernice Poland is Brenda's sister-in-law. She says the weekend camps speak to what a desirable place Pointe-aux-Chenes still is to live. She uses the phrase sportsman's paradise, Louisiana's tagline. It's on our license plates.
They didn't think it was worth anything for them. And now that it's kind of like a sportsman paradise, the fishing's good and everything. And now they kind of want to come over here.
It's a kind of gentrification, and it's another way the tribe's land and community is shrinking. Bernice says most of the young people in the tribe have already moved away.
Like, none of my children here live here. I have one in Texas, 3 in Shreveport, and 2 in Arkansas.
So adapting in place is turning out to be more like a slow migration. And that's not a new problem for the tribe. Cherie says their ancestors and elders already migrated due to land loss during the 70s to here, where Pointe-aux-Chenes is now.
Several miles further south, that was their main location. Over the years of land loss and coastal erosion, they continued to move a little bit further north, and this is the area that they settled to.
Visiting Pointe-aux-Chenes made me realize that relocation and adaptation are not that different. Both are a reaction to losing the land and the people on it. Both are strategies to try to keep the community together in the face of climate change.
It seems like in both Nunapachuk and Pointe-aux-Chenes, there's so much overlap between relocating and adapting in place. Like in Nunap, Morris Alexi is trying to get them to relocate, but the community also has to adapt in place in a way, getting grants for infrastructure right where they are.
Yeah, and like I said, in Pointe-aux-Chenes, they're doing their best to stay, but people end up slowly moving further away from the coast anyway.
And ultimately, I think that's because these tribes are dealing with an underlying problem that they didn't create and can't combat on their own: climate change. Indigenous communities have been forcibly relocated and compelled to make do where they are, even as the environment becomes more variable and literally destroys the land they're still doing their best to stay on.
And ideally, the tribes wouldn't have to make these tough decisions. Ideally, we'd stop warming the planet and destroying their land.
And that makes it even more stark that the tribes barely have any assistance to make these moves or adaptations.
Yeah, and in Pointe-aux-Chenes, it can be hard to get reliable assistance for rebuilding so people can stay. Cherie once told me rebuilding homes after Ida felt like a merry-go-round. Often things would just fall through.
I find myself coming back to the hope Morris and the other folks in Nunap I spoke to have for relocation. Despite these huge barriers and what amounts to basically the refusal of the state or federal governments to consider their culpability in the crisis, Nunap is trying to remain a community in the face of climate change. It's driving what they do.
And in Pointe-aux-Chenes, they're determined to keep this community here, even though all the circumstances keep pushing them away. And as climate change brings more and more uncertainty, Indigenous people all over the world on the front lines will have to keep reckoning with this question of how to maintain their livelihoods, their culture, and their communities.
Totally.
Thank you, Sage, for reporting this story with me.
Koya Nakwa, thank you so much.
Thank you, Sea Change, Eva Tesfaye, and Sage Smiley for the powerful reporting. Eve Abrams edited this episode with help from Carlyle Calhoun, Katie Basile, Garrett Hazelwood, and Brian Vasquez. Garrett also did fact-checking. Carlyle is the managing producer. Emmy Jankowski is the sound designer. The Economic Hardship Reporting Project co-published and supported this story. Sea Change gets support from the National Academy of Sciences, Engineering and Medicine's Gulf Research Program. Also, the Water Collaborative of Greater New Orleans. Sea Change theme music from John Batiste. Up From Dust music provided by David Condos, Tom Lonnie, Milktooth, and Blue Dot Sessions. Up From Dust is a production of KCUR Studios and Harvest Public Media, created by the Kansas News Service. Next time on Up From Dust, we're homing in more than one sense, on one of the Great Plains' most misunderstood creatures. What is it? I won't spoil the surprise. Till then, thanks for listening.